Interesting question. So sometimes employees and managers feel quite understandably concerned about the use of software and the fact that, whereas a conversation disappears into the ether, a live conversation, obviously the whole point is that there is a repository of that information if they're using software. So how to sort of handle, I suppose, the upsides of the fact that there's a track whilst managing some of those concerns about confidentiality or maybe privacy issues, for instance, with underperformance or well-being type issues. So you can imagine the kind of that some people are concerned about that. Who wants to have a view on that first?
I'm happy to kick off with that. I mean, especially this does touch the underperformance topic, and it's a conversation that we have with people all the time, and I'm sure pretty much everybody listening will have faced at some point the challenge of being told by a manager that so-and-so is really no good, and they really, we have to get rid of them. They have to be sacked because they're just not good enough in whatever way, or their behavior is not appropriate. And HR looks back through whatever records there are from their performance appraisals and finds that they've been rated as wonderful over and over and over again. And so they can't say it's a performance issue because nobody's ever said it was a performance issue, even if it was all along. And I'm sure we've all met that problem. I think that problem arises from two core roots. One is undoubtedly managers find it difficult to have those conversations. It's hard to say what's wrong, especially when you're not really sure what to do to put it right. So, for example, we might say easily, it's a capability issue. Now, it might be a capability issue if capability was very clear cut. So do you know how to do pivot tables on Excel spreadsheets or don't you? That's a clear cut piece of capability, and either you can do it or you can't. And if you refuse to learn, that would clearly be a capability, poor performance problem. But how do I say you're not a very good team leader? I mean, something that is much more subjective as to what makes a good team leader. And it's not perhaps that you're bullying people. You're not doing anything obviously wrong. It's just that you're just not leading your team very well. And a manager might find it very difficult to phrase that and very hard to respond to a challenge to that. So they tend not to write such comments and to struggle with having that conversation. And then if you then heap on top of that their concern about, I'm not very sure quite how to say all of this, and I absolutely don't want to write it in this system, because if I'm challenged and I'm proved somehow to have not understood what team leadership is, or it turns out this person's got a friend higher up the organization who can get it in for me, suddenly I've committed myself to something in writing that could come back to bite me. And I think there is a real challenge about enabling people to say, this is not right in writing. And I can go on and talk about some possible routes forward. We might do that in a moment. But Roly, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that before we talk about how we might tackle it.
The only thing that comes to mind is ratings and how difficult it is for managers to give ratings and to give, you might have a 5-point rating scale, and everybody knows that most people get 3 or 4, and so no matter that 2 is just before 3, that may feel like a big deal for a manager to give. And so I do pity the managers who need to do that, and I think when the research was done around what is it about the old-fashioned appraisals that managers find so difficult and time-consuming, and often it's just hovering over those buttons and wondering which one I should do, because one is going to set off a chain reaction that I'm going to have to back up and justify, and perhaps, actually that's not really what I wanted to do. So that's my only other point. But I don't know if you were going to come on and talk about thinking, being forward looking go on then.
So I'd say that the way in which we can help managers tackle that, and I will pick up on your ratings point in a minute, Roly, because I think that's we know lots of people listening are probably still stuck with ratings. So how do we deal with that? But in the way that I encourage people to especially what they've got to write down and make formal comments about where they are concerned about performance, is to do it on a future focus. So it is much better, let's be really simple about this, to say, in future, Alex has agreed that they will arrive on time for work every day. Instead of writing down, Alex is always late. So, and then if we say, in future, Sam will develop team leadership skills, particularly working to understand, why his or her team isn't performing as well as other teams, so that you write something that asks them to think forward. And then when you have your next performance conversation with them, you can then go, all right, let's look at that. How have we moved on from where we were last time? And I think it's that thinking forward and asking people not to admit that what's gone on in the past has been bad, but to ask them clearly to think forward. Now, I would just put a caveat around that. This is where we're talking about underperformance. If we're actually talking about something that I would call real poor performance, like bad behavior, bullying, or so, that shouldn't even have got as far as a performance review. We should have dealt with that somewhere else. So if you are sitting here thinking, I've got to write, this is a sackable offence in the performance review, it's like you're not having a performance conversation here. You are having, a much more formal conversation, and you need to think differently about that. And you might indeed need HR support. Absolutely, these systems are not for recording that kind of behaviour. They're here to help people understand where they're off track and to get them thinking how to get on track, I'd say, is how I would think about it, Roly. I don't know where else you might go with that.
No, that's exactly it. It's the little and often, the setting expectations, looking ahead rather than, in hindsight, is really just makes it so much easier. It makes it much easier for managers to be much more objective about things. And, they're like little goals. Or things that you would like to see from that person that are mutually agreed. They're easily kind of swallowable in day-to-day working life, and gives also fundamentally gives that employee the best chance of achieving what you would like them to achieve. It's really unfair to let someone just carry on for 6 months the way they are and then tell them, that you're not happy with it.
I couldn't agree more with that. I think that's absolutely right. And I think we do need to remember that, it's a very rare person who gets up in the morning and thinks, I'm going to do a really bad job today. I'm really going to go and do a terrible job, right? That isn't how the vast majority of the workforce gets out of bed in the morning. They get out of bed on the whole hoping that they can have a reasonably good day. And some of them might feel more motivated than others, but we don't choose to go and have bad days at work. Mm-hmm. And I think, as you say, leaving it for too long creates those bad days at work. And the more we have little and often conversations, and the more your systems can approach, support little and often conversations, the better, really.
And I think the kind of stuff that software can help with is having prompts in the check-in to say, are there any issues that we need to talk about? Is there anything going off track, little off track, kind of just veering off the path rather than dramatically off the path, and capturing stuff early and trying to put that in, to correct stuff really early. Because as you said, Hedda, it's the implications of, no one wants to do that, but the team finds it really frustrating when underperformance isn't being managed. So, for a manager to not tackle it, it might feel scary, but it's like, well, the implications later on are going to be way worse. Yeah. So just kind of get a bit of, perspective and maybe, a bit of courage to tackle it.